So hello SK, hello SK and Harini. I guess we'll get started in like 5, 10, 10, 15 minutes. Just waiting for a few more people to join the session in person. So we'll get started in like 10, 15 minutes. And sorry for the delay today. Uh, Today there was an issue. There was some power outage issue. That's why we have started the session late today. So yeah, I'll be just muting myself for the next 10, 15 minutes. Just waiting for a few people to join the session in person. Okay, it seems that no one is. Yeah, it it seems that no one is joining the session in person. So I guess I'll just start by addressing the YouTube audience only. So first of all, hello to everyone who's watching on YouTube. I'm Lakshya Saggi, the problem-solving TA for the NPTEL Games on Information course, Monday 6 to 8 p.m. sessions. Today there was a delay in the session, like we are having the session from 6:30 p.m. like because of some technical issues. So sorry for that. So this will be, I believe, our 11th session, and in this session, we it's since in this week's lectures, most of the content was more theoretical in nature than actually numerical based. So the questions in this session will also be theory based only. So in theory based, like we have done in the past, what I'll be doing is I'll be going through the high level concepts which are discussed in the course in this week's lectures first, because they involved a lot of theory, and yeah, and then we'll discuss some questions based on that theory only. And these and this can also act like a kind of revision notes for you guys before the exams or something. So I'll just maybe we can just get started, and I'll just share my screen. Uh, so let me just share my screen, guys. Okay, so I hope my screen is visible to everyone. So we can get started. Yeah. So as I said, will be for, I have some kind of notes, like mostly the main ideas which were discussed in the lectures. I've just kind of put them together in the single document so that they can help us in quick revision of everything. And then we have a bunch of questions, and most all the questions are theoretical in nature only. And you may have observed that in this week's quiz question assignment questions also, the questions are mostly theoretical in nature. So yeah, these questions have the same flavor and more or less like I hope if you solve these, then if you understand these, then the quiz questions won't be hard for you anyways. So I guess we can get started with the what was discussed in this week's lectures. So first of all, uh, in the first lecture for this week, uh, um, we discussed about the role of information and communication uh, in games. So in earlier, like in previous weeks, what we were talking about were equilibriums, when that like dynamic equilibriums, or let's say simultaneous equilibriums. There we did not have this concept of communication between the players, that these players can initially communicate with each other and choose the strategies in that sense or something. So the role of communication was very low in previous lectures, but in this week we'll be observing what we mostly discuss about what the role does communication play in determining uh, what will be the final outcome of the game. So most of this week is most concepts of this week are based on like communications only, communication in gameplay. So in this one of the things is pre-play communication, where suppose the game's players are kind of allowed to communicate before they start to play, and so like if they can communicate, they can maybe strategize together or something. And this communication, how do we integrate it mathematically, like how do we integrate this communication as a mathematical model? So what we say is every player at every point of time takes some decisions, where these decisions can be something which are actions or which are signals. And how do these actions and signals differ? So actions actions are what the actions which players take, and these actions actually did impact the cost, the the cost at which the game will end in, or let's say the payoff matrix. So these actions affect like the So the rows and columns of the payoff matrices correspond to just different actions only. So rows and columns are not functions of signals, they are just functions of actions. Whereas what are signals? So signals don't affect like uh, any entry in the payoff matrix, and signals are just information carriers. Like so, a player can send a signal to the another player about some kind of information. But note that if a player sends some kind of a signal, or let's say some kind of an information to the other player, then what can happen is as the other player's information gets updated, the final outcome of the game may change. And that will be because maybe the other player can change his or her action if he or she receives some new information. And if if the player changes his action, then the final payoff in the then the final payoff which every player receives will actually change. So even though signals don't directly affect the entries of the payoff matrix, but these signals indirectly affect the final payoff which the players will receive, because these signals carry some information, and with changing information the game might end differently. So yeah, so yeah, one thing to keep in mind is even though signals don't affect the entries of the payoff matrix, they certainly affect uh, the final payoffs which the players will receive. Okay, and one of the most common ways to visualize this communication in gameplay are games which are called sender receiver games, and these are very much similar to Stackelberg games. At least they look similar. Like although they have like Stackelberg games don't necessarily have this signals kind of a thing, but on a high level, these are very similar to Stackelberg games. So here in sender receiver games, there's a sender which has some information. So initially there's a sender which has some information which no other player like. So there are two types of players. One is a sender, one is a receiver. So sender has the information initially which receiver does not have. And now what sender does is it can send this it can choose to send this information to the receiver. So it can send the information to the receiver in form of the signal, obviously, because signals are what are information carriers. So sender sends a signal of information to the receiver, and on seeing this information, receiver takes some action, and this action decides the cost and payoff of both players. So action of in the sender receiver games, action of receiver is what decides the final payoff for senders and receivers. But note that the final payoff will also depend on what information does the sender send. Though it does not directly affect the entries of the payoff matrix, but what will be the final actions in the game, they will be determined by the information which the sender sends. So this is a very abstract notion of these sender receiver games. And why was I saying these are similar to Stackelberg games? Because in Stackelberg games also there is this first acting player and the other player now knows, and then every other player knows what the first acting player has played or done. So here also that kind of a thing is happening, that sender can be thought of the first acting player and he takes the decision of sending the information, and then receivers know the information and take appropriate actions. So yeah, and then yeah, so then there were some discussions around like a principal agent contract theory. So the sender receiver games, this notion of sender receiver games is very abstract, and we can look at some specific instances of these kinds of games. So one very common usage of the sender receiver games is this principal agent contract theory. Sorry for this. So principal agent contract theory is nothing but you can think of these as like contracts are something which are very much which are not abstract notions. These are something which are prevalent in real life, right? So think of principal as some kind of a job provider and agent as some kind of a job seeker. So job provider, so basically an employer and an employee do sign a contract, right? And in these contracts it's like so what happens is usually in like employments, like an employer uh, gives some kind of a contract to a potential employee, and then it's up to the employee to accept the contract or not. So here also the framework is the same. Like principal is the employer, so he or she will lay down the contract for the agent, and then it's up to the agent to accept the contract or reject the contract. So there can be multiple kinds of principal agent games, but first let's talk about the simplest kinds of games of principal agent. So here, like where we can assume that everyone has full information, and what this means is in these kinds of games, so there is this principal who can be thought of as the receiver or the uninformed player. So like we talked about sender receiver games. Why is this a special instance of sender receiver games? Principal can be thought of as a receiver or an uninformed player, and the agent is the sender or the informed player. And what information is this agent actually carrying, uh, which he or she can send to principal? It's the amount of work the agent has put in. So note that, so suppose an employee is working, then his or her manager uh, does not exactly know how much hours has the employee worked on some project, right? It's up to the employee to tell to the employer, like how much have I worked or how much. But the employer, what the employer can observe is like there are different notions in principal agent games. The employer can observe different kinds of things. Employer in some kinds of games, maybe employer can observe how much hours actually the agent has put in, or how much profit does he or she make for the company or something else. So these are different kinds of principal agent games. Let's not get into that right now. But yeah, on a very high level, so there's this principal who's the uninformed player, or which was actually receiver in these end receiver games, and there's this agent who is the informed player. So uh, what happens is in these kinds of games, so first of all, principal offers a wage to the agent, saying that like this wage can be function of different parameters. So right now we are talking about games with full information. In the games with full information, we can assume that principal also knows how much effort has the agent put in. So the wage for the agent, so principal, so employee, so principal is basically the employer. So employee offers a wage, which is like which is a function of the effort made by the employee. The more the effort, so it's an increasing function of effort. So more the effort of the employee, more will be his or her wage. So this is what the principal offers. And now agent or the employee has the option to accept or reject the contract. So if the agent accepts, then otherwise accept that. So and note that what we'll be assuming is these contracts are kind of binding right now. That if the agent has signed the contract, then he or she cannot walk away from it, just like that. So if the agent accepts, then so if the agent has accepted, so note that if the agent has accepted the contract, then neither party can walk away from the contract. So principal and agent both are stuck with this contract. And now it's up to the agent to choose an optimal effort level E. Like agent knows, so suppose an contract has been accepted, so agent now knows that how much effort will I put in, so that and for what corresponding effort, how much wage will I be getting. So agent knows this information, right? So now what agent wants to do is kind of choose an optimal effort level. So what you can think is uh, agent's utility. So what? So there will be an underlying agent's utility function also. And note that this agent's utility function, uh, we'll assume, is not just based on wages. Like higher the wage, more is the agent's utility. This is not the case. Like in real world also, employees seek work-life balance also, not just wages. So agent's utility will actually be a function of the wage provided for some kind of an effort, and it will also be a function of like the amount of effort agent has put in. So the more the effort agent has to put in, lower will be the utility, and more the wage the agent gets, higher will be the utility. And this is what we discuss here in this principal agent model. So agent's efforts are denoted by this variable E, and yeah. So if agent makes an effort of E, suppose this makes a profit of Q of E to the principal. And out of this Q of E, the principal has to pay like the wages to the pay back the wages of the employee. So payoff for the principal is something like Q of E minus W of E. So uh, uh, the profit, or let's say the utility for the employer, is essentially a function of the profit that the employer has made through the efforts of the employee minus the salary or the wages which he or she had to give away to the employee. So that's why it's an and like more the profit for the employer or the principal, then more should be the payoff, and that's why it's an increasing function of Q of E, and it's a decreasing function of W of E. Because so what every principal wants is to give lowest wages while extracting maximum profits, right? So this is how we can model the payoff for the principal. And what will be the agent's utility here? As I said already, that agent's utility is not just a function of wages. Agent does not just care about the wages, but also cares about the amount of effort he or she has to put in. So agent's utility can be thought of as a function of the effort, comma, uh, the wages. So wages corresponding to that effort. And note that the utility function will be decreasing with the amount of effort, because like if for the same wage, suppose if you give the wage fixed, then if you have to put in more effort for the same wage, then you will probably uh, be worse off than suppose you were getting the same wage while uh, giving lower effort. Like, yeah, suppose there are two jobs, like one job takes just 4 hours a day and other job takes about 6 hours a day, but both offer same salary, then you will obviously prefer the 4 hour per day job. And this is the same concept here. And it's an increasing function of the wages. More the wages, better is the utility. And also, like we'll say that, and also there was this notion of reservation which was talked about, which is that like basically an agent, the agent can choose to get into the contract or not get into the contract. And there is a condition which is given to us in the game that agent will get into the contract if and only if uh, the utility of the agent corresponding to some effort E and wages corresponding to that E is greater than equal to some U bar. So if agent does not get at least U bar utility from the contract, then agent will not even get into the contract. But so this is what employer will have to ensure. And we discuss why is this kind of reservation kind of a thing needed. This is because suppose this kind of we did not put this kind of a restriction that agent. So what this means is like suppose agent did not have a choice to accept or reject the offer. Like if we don't have this kind of a condition, then agent will be accepting the offer no matter what happens. But now what the principal can do is exploit the agent. What the principal can do is it can offer wages of minus infinity to the agent, let's say. And what this means is, and this was discussed, this is also called slavery, where the agent has to always accept the offer. So what the principal can do is take away money from the agent also, as well as make the agent work hard. And since agent cannot deny any contract, and the principal wants to maximize his payoff, this will be a solution to this game. So a solution to the game without reservation will be slavery. And that's something which we want to avoid. So that's why we introduce this notion of reservation, that that agent can walk away from the contract if he or she does not get at least U bar utility. And we'll assume that always principal. We'll assume that principal usually wants. Principal is always better off when someone has at least accepted the contract. Like principal is always worse off if contract has not been accepted by anyone. So principal will want to now. So principal does not have the incentive to give minus infinity wages now. So principal will give some kind of wages. So so since principal, like we are talking about games with full information, so principal already knows utility functions and everything of the agent. So now what the principal can do is set the wages, set this function W of E such that always agent gets a utility of U bar while maximizing principal's payoff, right? And what will be the W star wages function? So we discussed this in the equilibrium. What kind of a function will this be? Uh, so note that at any, so the strategy, this W star is being chosen. So this W star is a strategy and it's being chosen by the principal, not the agent. What the principal will want to do is he'll want to set the wages. So note that uh, principal's utility, principal, so this expression is what gives us like how this, using this expression we can determine like what will be the wage, optimal wage for the principal, and why is this the function. So at in the final solution of the game, the optimal strategy chosen by the principal will be such that the utility of agent at some effort E and the wages corresponding to that E should be equal to U bar. And why is this the case? Because if agent offers, suppose some more, if the principal offers a bit more wage than W star E for the same effort E, then agent's utility increases to some U bar plus epsilon. But note that this means that the principal can actually take away some of the wages while still ensuring that the principal will. Okay, so principal will take away some of the wages while ensuring that the agent will still accept the contract. So since a principal wants to give out minimum wages while extracting maximum profits, so this is what the wages condition will satisfy. That the wages are such that they just barely give U bar utility to the agent. Okay, so this will be the wages uh, at the final solution of the game, and corresponding to this condition, uh, the principal will just maximize this profit. So while ensuring that this condition happens, principal will just maximize this profit over poly. So yeah. So this is like a principal agent model, and this is one possible solution when there is this full information. And what do we mean by full information? What we mean is here the principal kind of already knew about like Q, what is effort E. So he or she can determine what Q of E is actually equal to, and similarly what W of E is actually equal to, and so on. But note that usually it's not possible for an employer, or let's say a principal, to actually know this E directly. And that's why there is this information gap between principal and the agent. So agent knows how much effort he or she has put in, but principal does not know how much effort has the agent put in. The principal can only observe in the real world only partial things, or there are some areas where the principal can observe like everything also. But yeah, in general in this model, what the principal observes can vary, because it's not truly obvious every always in real life that the employer will always know what the how much work has the employee done or things like that, right? So yeah, this was a game where principal knew about efforts E also, but there can be like games where uh, principal does not come to know about efforts E, or like, so there's basically this information gap between principals and agents. And this information gap between principal and agent creates some very interesting scenarios. These were also discussed in the lectures. So like something like a moral hazard. And what's this moral hazard? So suppose here we said that everything was observable by the principal, and that's how principal decided the strategy. But suppose there is a case where principal cannot observe anything, like so what the principal observes is neither an effort nor the output. So principal does not know like how much output does the agent produce, or and does not even know about the efforts that the agent has put in. So efforts and outputs are two different things. Like efforts is something which the uh, agent is doing, and output is something like so there can be two agents. One can like work for 8 hours and achieve the same thing. Another can work for 4 hours and achieve the same thing. So even though their outputs are different, their efforts are different. Like one has put in 8 hours, one has put in 4 hours. Their output may be the same. That both do the same assignment. So suppose like uh, so there's this scenario in the this is another type of principal agent game where like principal cannot observe the effort put in, neither can observe the output of the agent. And here as can be seen, like the wages which the principal will offer cannot be a function of anything, like since he or she cannot observe the effort or out. So the uh, principal can only offer constant wages. So the wage offered will be a constant function. And now what happens in these kinds of games? What happens in these kinds of games is like now if we look at it from the agent's perspective, like agent's utility function was the amount of effort that the agent has put in, comma the wage the agent gets corresponding to effort. And note that now this wage becomes a constant because principal could not observe the effort. So the utility function for the agent is now just a function of e comma w, and where this w is a constant, so utility is just a function of e, right? And since it's just a function of e, and we know that uh, principal will always uh, want the agent to accept the offer. So principal will always be giving away at least some minimum wage so that this participation condition, this reservation condition is satisfied. So principal will always be offering wage such that this condition, reservation condition, is satisfied. So there will be this wage will be non-zero, which the principal will be offering. And now note that we know that u of e will now always be, so this is a function of u of e comma w. Now this w is a constant, so this will become a function of u of e. But we also know w was such that this u of e always remains greater than equal to u bar. And what this means is like agent can put in any amount of effort and still get uh, the utility of at least u bar, and so remain in the contract. So what will agent want to do? He will want to maximize his or her utility. So the agent will want to maximize his or her utility, and that will be when he or she puts in zero effort, right? Because it's a function. Now this is a function of effort. Like utility is a function of effort, and it's a decreasing function of effort because the more effort you put in, the lesser is your utility. So, and we know that even for zero effort, like at least this u bar condition is satisfied. That's why, like in this kind of scenario, optimal effort for the agent will be zero. So if the principal cannot observe effort or output or anything, then this creates a moral hazard in the sense that principal cannot control how much does the agent work. Like even if agent works, like agent can also work 0 hours without affecting the solution of the game. And this is not something which the principal would want, right? Principal would not want the agent to not work at all. And this is something which is called and this is why, like basically this kind of a thing is why it's important for the principal to know some things at least. Like it's important for the employer to know like how much work has employee done, or like to assess the value, to assess the employee at some level or the other. Because if you just leave an employee on its own without any communication with the employee, then even if the employee suppose does not work at all, he or she will still get some salary. And that's what the principal will want to avoid. And this is what is called a moral hazard. Like why does this create a moral hazard? Because now it's up to the morals of the agent. Like agent is getting wages, a fixed salary for free. So agent does not have any incentive to work. And now it's up to the morals of the agent, like if he or she wants to work or not work. Like because people might be like some people might have uh, higher morals, and they may say that, oh, I'm getting paid, so I'll not work 0 hours. Even though if I work for 0 hours, I'll still get paid, but I'll still work some. And that's why this is a moral dilemma for the agents, and that's why it's called a moral hazard. I guess like the nomenclature doesn't really matter, it's just a story. But the main key takeaway from this is like if the principal does not observe anything, then the optimal effort, like zero effort by the agent, is also a solution of the game, which is something you'll want to avoid in real life. And then there were some other notions which were okay. One more comment here. So say okay, maybe like this comment is already being given by me, but like that's why, because of this moral hazard kind of a condition, it's very important to assess the agents in some way or the other, right? And that's why usually there are multiple schemes in different principles, or let's say the employers on how to assess the employee's performance. Okay. And now then there was this discussion about role of nature in these kinds of games, and what does nature mean here? Like it's just luck based factor. And why do we want to discuss about luck based factor? So like this was discussed in the lectures also, that suppose a person is working in some kind of a mm, let's say a person is a salesman or something. So it might happen that a salesman goes to a place and he or she gets very lucky, and the first 10 customers he or she talks to are all interested in buying the insurance. So like all the customers were in dire need of getting an insurance, so they end up buying the insurance. But there can be another like employee, another an insurance salesperson who talks to not just 10 but hundreds of people, but still he or she talks to the people, but the people are all those 100 people already have an insurance, and so they don't want another insurance. And so the other player, the salesperson who worked more, still was able to sell lesser insurance. And this is kind of what we call luck also, right? So it was just that the first person who sold out 10 out of 10 insurances was just more lucky than the other person, even though the other person might be a better salesman. But if a customer already has an insurance, then why will he or she get another? Yeah. So so this is why one wants to model this uh, role of nature or luck into these principal agent games also, because while assessing employees, you don't want to just look at how much uh, output does the employee give to your company. Because it might be the case that the employee was just lucky one time around, but he or she may not get lucky the next time, and you will need more smarter employees instead. So yeah. And now how can this role of nature or luck can be modeled into the picture? So luck can be thought of as something which is random, right? So luck is something which comes out from a, let's say, a distribution. Like you can think of this luck factor coming out from a probability distribution. Like it's not like one person will always be unlucky and the other will always be lucky. So luck kind of balances out in a long term frame, and that's why you can think of luck being coming out of a probability distribution. So now what the principal or the employer wants is this kind of a thing. So the efforts put in by the, like, so Q of E is actually, so this Q function denotes the output by the employee. So the most common model here is so usually in the principal agent models, the most common scenario is the principal is not able to observe this effort E, but is usually able to observe this Q of E. Like we know that like if the principal was able to observe nothing, then we have this moral hazard. But if the principal was able to observe everything, then it's too much of a cost to bear, right? Like a principal cannot really go to every employee and know what the employee is doing actually, like how much work is doing the employee is doing work, how much work is the employee doing at every moment. So but instead, like principal can look at the long term, like how much has the employee gained for the company. And that's how a principal can like assess how good is an employee. So usually like what the most common kind of model used here in this principal agent models is the one where principal observes this Q of E, but not directly this E. So principal knows what this principal can observe this Q of E, but not E. So in that kind of scenario, this is where we were talking about this role of luck or nature. And why are we talking about this? Because now so basically the amount of output produced by the employee is what the principal sees. But principal should also keep in mind that output does not just depend on the efforts of the employee or the skill of the employee. It also depends on luck. And that's how you can model this, that suppose this luck factor is coming out from some kind of a distribution, which is parameterized by these parameters theta. So what this essentially means is now principal wants to maximize his or her profits. So in the earlier, what the expression for the profits was Q of E, like V of Q of E minus W of E, right? But now note that this Q of E and this W of Q of E are not just like fixed with respect, like these are not fixed. These also, like this Q of E also changes with the probabilities, like, or the instantiation or the luck factor. So what you can think of this as, like, now this Q of E changes with like uh, it's a probability distribution and it's parameterized by these parameters theta. So Q of E at some parameter theta minus wages at this output when observed at parameters theta. So these are so basically at some fixed parameters theta, at some instantiated parameters theta, the principal gets a reward of like Q of E comma theta minus wages of Q of E comma theta, because wages are now just dependent on Q of E and not E. And since these parameters theta are coming from a probability distribution, so naturally you just take the expectation over all these. And this is what the principal will want to maximize. So principal will want to maximize the profits in expectations. And like and what's the parameter with respect to which the principal will maximize? It's this wages. So principal will want to choose some wage function which maximizes this expression in terms of expectations, right? And one thing to keep in mind is like usually, since you are like there are other models also, like these were also talked about in the lectures, but one thing usually to keep in mind is uh, agents usually don't know these parameters theta. Like agents can also know, but like one model can be, so there can be different models actually, like we'll talk about them later, but uh, one model can be like okay, you know that everything, the profits and everything are parameterized by these parameters theta, but these theta may not actually be known by the agents. Like an agent might not know about his or her luck, what's his or her luck, but there can be some cases where the agent actually knows about this also. Like an agent can also, like, in some cases it might be the case that the agent does not know whether he or she will be making good profits because of his or her luck, but in some other cases like he or she might know. So there can be like different models for modeling these kinds of things differently. But if agent, like in one kind of model where agent does not know about the distribution or does not know about these parameters theta, then the effort which the agent will put in will just be like, what the agent wants to do is just maximize his or her utility, and he will want to maximize his or her utility in expectation, right? So these parameters theta have been initialized, but agent does not know about these parameter thetas. So what the amount of effort he'll put in will be like such that this expected utility is greater than equal to u bar. But in the same scenario, if like agent knew theta, but like but there could have been scenarios where agent knew actually these theta, although these theta are coming from probability distribution, but this agent actually knows about these theta. Then, but principal does not know. Then principal will still want to maximize these in expectation, but agent will not need this expectation in the expression. because if agent knows these thetas. So these can be different models, like, yeah, but yeah, like the different models can be used for different scenarios and things like that, right? But this model is where like even agent does not know about this theta or about the role of what how is the nature affecting them. So there are okay, maybe this can be different types of nature action. So as I said, here we are talking about the expression where even agent does not know about theta. So there can be games where agent knows about theta but principal does not know, where there can be game where both do not know about theta and things like that. So we want to model this also in some kind of a mathematical framework, and this can be done by thinking of nature also as some kind of a player who also takes an action. And now like and we can and the stage at which nature takes an action determines like what player knows what. So suppose and these different types of games are called different kinds of things. So so the game where which has a moral hazard with hidden actions is the game where first principal offers a contract to the agent, then agent accepts or rejects the contract, and then agent puts in some effort, and finally nature does something. Like suppose nature's two choices for these parameters were high and low, so finally nature does something. So here neither the principal nor the agent, none of them knew about the nature's parameters. So this kind of a game is called moral hazard with hidden actions, because even the agent does not know here about the nature's actions. But there can be post contract. So another kind of a game can be post contractual hidden knowledge. And another model can be this, where principal and agent sign the contract, and then if agent accepts the contract, then nature plays a role. And after nature plays a role, agent observes this and then puts in the effort. So suppose agent was all so suppose the salesperson was already told that the people whether he or she has gotten lucky or not. So that's why in this post contractual hidden knowledge, agent knows about these parameters thetas before making some effort. So he or she can adjust their efforts, like they can decrease their efforts if they are lucky, right? So this model is called post contractual hidden knowledge. Similarly, another model is adverse selection. And in adverse selection, what happens is first nature plays a role. So here nature was playing a role after the contract was signed. Here nature plays a role even before the contract is signed. But principal, okay, we'll always assume that principal never knows about nature. Like principal never knows about what's the like like what's the from nature initialized to what are the parameter nature is initialized to. Because usually an employer won't know has the employee gotten lucky, is the employee been assigned to a good area or a bad area or something like that. So although nature initializes the parameters first, principal does not know about these parameters, but then principal signs this contract. So here, but agent knows about how has the nature been initialized to. So in this kind of adverse selection, what happens is agent knows about nature's initialization even before the contract is signed. So in moral hazard with hidden actions, agent never knew about nature. In post-contractual hidden knowledge, agent did not know about nature before the contract was signed, but before making an effort, like agent knew about nature only after contract was signed, but before making an effort. And in adverse selection, agent knew about the nature even before signing the contract. So here agent knows a lot more things and can like maximize his profits a lot more. Like with more information, you can more um, like you can in a more fine-grained setting maximize the profits, right? So this is called adverse selection. And similarly, there are some other things we're also discussed, which is called screening and signaling. And in screening and signaling, what happens is like okay, we were just talking right now. We are just talking about like this nature, like nature's activities and like agent observing this or not observing this, and at what point is the agent observing this. But in signaling, what happens is suppose nature gets initialized first to high to low, but then agent can suppose send a signal to the principal, and that signal can uh, so that signal can actually affect like what the principal does. So here like first decision was here first decision were taken by principal. Here for almost everywhere first decision between principal and agent was taken by the principal. But here like in signaling, first decision is actually taken by the agent who gives a signal to principal, and principal then takes a corresponding action. So the action can be offering a contract to the agent or something like that. Similarly, what happens in screening is nature takes high or low first, and then like principal offers a contract to the agent, what which the agent can accept or reject. Right. So these are like different kinds of models for different kinds of scenarios. In some scenarios, like one model might be better, sometimes other scenarios and the model might be better. So we can just discuss some examples like we are discussing these moral hazard with hidden actions. So let's just make a mathematical model out of it. And let's see like how like discussing all of this in theory seems nice, but we also need to implement this mathematically, right? And this is how it can be thought of in mathematically also. So like how can we model moral hazards here? So let's say principal is the manager and agent is the worker. And then the the amount that like the profit that the agent makes is actually equal to the effort made by the agent. So x is the final profit made. So this x is actually equal to a plus some epsilon, where this a is some like a is what the efforts of the agent, and this epsilon is the noise. Basically, this noise is epsilon is provided by the nature. So this in this moral hazards kind of a thing, like note that nature is working even after agents. Like even neither agent nor principal know about the outcome of nature. So agent takes an action first, and then noise gets added later, and this is the final output. And now what principal wants is to maximize his or her profit in expectation, or he maximizes his or her utility in expectation. And so what's the utility? So it's expectation, and like this utility will be function of x, which is the output, minus this psi symbol, and like this psi will correspond to the payment made by principal to the agent. So like this is the wages, and this is what the principal gets out of the agent. So x is what the principal finally gets out of the agent, and this psi is the payment made, the wages the agent. And now you have to take maximum over all the expectation over the expectation, and what are the argument with respect to which with respect to which one will maximize, it will be the wages, as we have already talked about. So yeah, the principal will have to select such wages so that this whole expression is maximized. So principal knows about so principal and agents already know about the probability distribution of this epsilon. They just don't know exactly what this epsilon is instantiated to. So, but note that this is not the only thing which should happen in this game. Another condition in this game is this condition of participation, that the agent will only participate like for a given wage if and only if his or her expected utility is something like greater than or equal to u bar, which is the reservation utility. So like the so agent will only participate if his or her like if he or she can extract utility of u bar a from this contract. He or she can at least extract a utility of u bar a from this contract in expectation. So now so now note that this constraint is from agent side about participation, and this was the optimization problem for the principal. But note that this function finally has to be chosen by the principal only. So finally, it's the principal's problem, and the problem can be modeled as principal wanting to maximize his or her utility subject to this constraint. So this constraint should happen, and principal wants to maximize his or her expected utility subject to this constraint. So this is the final problem which the principal can solve. Right. So now, like although the constraints were on agent side, but you can put these constraints like in the optimization problem of the principal itself, and like it's not a big deal. You can see this yourself. So this is the final optimization problem from the principal side. Okay, then there was this talk about cost of micromanagement. So note that here what happens is like the models which we have talked about till now, what happens is initially principal chooses some contract, chooses some wages contract, and once the contract is signed, now the onus is on the employee or the agent to maximize his or her utility. So what agent will always want to do is he'll want to work the least while maximizing his or her own utility. So an agent will always want to work the least possible amount of time. But note that if suppose principal was working himself, like suppose agent was not working, but rather the principal was working himself, then what he or she would have done would have been uh, like maximizing over the set of actions also. Like right now, like on a high level, you can see like there's some friction or there's some amount of utility getting lost for the principal because what agent wants to do is while getting some wage, agent does not want to work a lot. Like agent only wants to work that much so that he or she can get like a bare minimum of like u bar a utility, something like that. Whereas what the principal would want is agent would want is to agent to work maximum possible amount of time. So like on a high level, you can think of this as like in real world, it's always in better interest of the company that like not always, but like what the company might want is the employee to work suppose 12 hours a day. Suppose an employee has a contract, and with respect to the contract, the employee is only required to do, let's say, 8 hours of work a day. But it's always in company's better interest that suppose the employee can work. So employee works like instead of 8 hours, if the employee works 12 hours a day, it's in better interest of the company. But it's not in better interest of the employee. But employee is the one who's choosing the amount of hours he or she has to put in, right? So the friction comes because the choice of amount of work that has to be put in is on the employee. Employee choose how many hours he or she works while getting the same wage. So while getting the same wage up, the company will always want that the employee works more hours, but employee does not want to work more hours. And this is where this what we call this friction or this micromanagement, like cost of micromanagement comes in. That suppose like if the company was allowed to so if the company was if the suppose the manager or the principal was the one who was working himself or herself, then he or she will want to maximize the utility with respect to the actions also. So he or she will just care about this u bar a condition. Like suppose he or she will always respect this participant condition, but then he or she will always want to maximize the utility for himself. But note that this is what the employer wants or the principal wants, not the employee or the agent. So this kind of thing does not get realized in real life because agents and principals are two different people. Agent wants to maximize his utility, but principal wants to maximize his utility. So in real life, like employee will be working 8 hours. So you can think of this as VPFB, which was first best, as something which would be the ideal cost which is given to the company, like the ideal profit made by the company. So let's say VPFB is something like, suppose the employee was working 12 hours a day, then this is the maximum profit which the company can extract through the employee. Right. If the employee was working 12 hours a day, then company could have made much more profits. And we could have, let's suppose that profit is what we call VPFB. But actually, in reality, employees are just working 8 hours a day. And that's what we call VP. And so note that the first best, which are like the best profits which the company can make, will always be greater than equal to VP, which is actually happening. And this is because like, so what essentially you can see is like some kind of a profit is getting lost because of this friction between companies and employees. So some kind of a profit is getting lost for the company, not for the employees, but rather for the company. And like so this is usually, this VP is usually called the second best, and this is called the first best. So like if company was allowed to micromanage, so tell the employee how much hours to work and what to work on, if everything was micromanaged by the company, then like this kind of VP first best profit would have been realized. But we know micromanagement does not work that much in real life. And in real life, like employees will choose this VP, which is also called usually second best. And this VP minus VPFB, which is first best minus the second best profit, is what is called the information rent. So this is the cost VPFB minus VP, which the company is missing out on. And why is the company missing out on this kind of a cost? It's because like because of this friction between company and the employee. Like because employee can extract the same wages at some lower efforts, or like extract the same utility at some lower efforts. And this is because like and this happens because principal does not know about the actual exact amount of hours that the employee has put in, but it only knows about the output that the employee produced. And because of this difference in the information of employee and the company, like this kind of a friction occurs. And that's why this difference in first best and second best is called the information rent. So basically, this is the cost that the company is paying for the difference in information. Like if company knew about the actual efforts of all the employees, then company would have designed the wages scheme in such a way that like it would not have to pay this kind of an information rent. Okay. So this kind of information rent is always just needed to be paid. Like this concept of information rent is only applicable when the game is not full information game. If the game is full information, then like this kind of a thing will not occur. Like you can see for yourself. Okay, then. So we talked about this moral hazards, and then we talked about this like micromanagement in these kinds of things. And now let's talk about this adverse selection kind of scenario. This was also discussed in the lectures. So maybe I'll just push this on next page. So in adverse selection, what happens is like maybe we can just talk about it first here. So what did adverse selection say here? So adverse selection said that even before signing the contracts, nature took some steps. So there was randomization from the side of nature even before the contract was signed. And this high or low can be observed by the agent, but not the principal. So nature has took some steps, like something like it has said something to high or low, and then like there's this contract which goes on, and then you have to accept or reject. So this can be, so one instance of this can be, so like there are two people and nature has initialized one of them to be efficient and the other to be inefficient. Suppose there are two agents, two types of agents, and both are initial, like one is initialized to be efficient, one is initialized to be inefficient. Like it's like usually like the amount of talent or like something is different in different kinds of people, and this is something which is random. So it can be thought of that whether a person is talented or not is coming from probability distribution, right? So, and what does efficient and inefficient mean? Like this was discussed in the lectures. Like for outputting some, so for producing the output Q. So let's say there's this fixed output Q which the employee has to produce. So for producing some output Q, the efficient employee will just have to do like theta under bar Q amount of work, whereas this inefficient employee will have to pay like theta over bar Q. Like we'll have to work for more, and this theta upper bar is more than theta lower bar, which means that for producing the same output Q, like the efficient employee or this underbar employee has to put in lesser number of hours. So this employee has to put in lesser number of hours than this employee to get the same output. And this is what you call like and this like what employee gets what theta bar is determined by the nature. Like suppose these thetas are what are coming from nature. So from probability distribution. So now employees know about themselves whether they are efficient or inefficient, right? Even before signing the contract, they know. Like before even getting to a job, you know if you are an efficient worker or an inefficient worker. But the company does not know really. And then in this kind of a scenario, it would be bad for the principal if he or she just lays down one contract, because then like one single contract for both efficient and inefficient employees will not really work, because like you can see for this for yourself, like company won't be maximizing their profits if one single contract is applied for both efficient and inefficient employees. Like usually for different, like in real world also you can observe this, that for different technical levels or like aptitude levels of different people, like the pay for different people is different. Like it's not like you're offering the same contract to a variety of people, even though their maybe technical talent or quantitative talent is different. Like so you get rewarded more for being more talented, right? At least in some sense. And this is what happens in this kind of a model also. What happens is the principal actually lays down a menu of contracts. So principal actually lays down a menu of contracts where the principal says that maybe if you do this Q under bar amount of work, you will get this P under bar amount of salary. And similarly, if you do this P over Q over bar amount of work, if you output this much, then you get this much P upper bar kind of a salary. And participation conditions will be like what you will want is both the efficient and inefficient employees, both of these to participate. So ideally, what you want is to separate efficient and inefficient employees while taking in both of them. So what you want is like maybe there are some upper level jobs in the same company and there are some lower level jobs. What you would want is you would want that like you get some people in the higher post also, some people in the lower post also, and the higher post goes to the more efficient person and the lower post goes to somewhat inefficient person. This is what you would want in a company, right? So you want everyone to participate. So you want the more efficient person to participate with respect to this efficient contract, and you want this inefficient contract to go to this inefficient person. But like we'll have to ensure this also, that so here we have only ensured the participation, but we are not ensured that which person accepts which contract. But this can be actually thought that you can always see that an efficient person will always choose the efficient contract, and if inefficient person will always choose inefficient contract. Like this can be done by putting in these constraints that P over bar minus theta bar Q bar. So this is like the utility for the inefficient person if he chooses the inefficient contract. So this utility should be more than the utility if the inefficient person chooses the efficient contract. So if these two constraints are satisfied along with these participation constraints, so this constraint says that like an inefficient person should always have better utility with the inefficient contract, and efficient person should have better utility with the efficient contract. And if these kinds of constraints, you can choose your P's and Q's, you can choose your contracts in such a way such that these constraints are satisfied, then then the principal is actually done. So principal ends up hiring for both the posts, and in the higher post, the efficient person gets in, and in the lower post, the inefficient person gets in. And yeah, so on an intuitive level, on what's happening is just giving an example with respect to real life is you can see that what these kinds of incentive compatibility constraints, what they mean in real life setting is suppose so suppose there's an inefficient person and you have already told from this construct that you will have to output this much per day, like you'll have to write 10,000 lines. Suppose there is an inefficient person, so one contract says that you have to just write 1,000 lines of code per day, but the other contract says that you have to write 5,000 lines of code per day. And suppose it takes for the inefficient person, it takes to code 5,000 lines, it takes uh, 15 hours. Like suppose the inefficient person takes 15 hours, or let's say 20 hours to write 5,000 lines of code per day. Then the inefficient person will not ever choose this efficient contract, because the inefficient person will, even though the wages may be higher, but the inefficient person would not want to go away every day 20 hours, because you cannot really work for 20 hours. You have to sleep and everything also. So but suppose there's an efficient person who just takes 10 hours to write up that much lines of code, then the efficient person may prefer this contract. So what this essentially means is the more talented people will go for jobs which require more skills, and less talented people will go for jobs which require lesser skills or something like that. And these are what these incentive compatibility constraints just ensure. Okay, then. So this was more or less everything in terms of theory, which I wanted to discuss. So we just did some kind of a brief overview about like, at least not all the models. Obviously, there are a lot of models in reality. Everything can be modeled in a different sense, but we got a high level idea of what are the most common principal agent models. And these were the models which were discussed in the lectures also. So now maybe we have some time, and we can discuss a few questions, a few theoretical questions based on these only. So almost all of these questions are true, false, or correct, incorrect kind of questions, and they are really not difficult after we have gone through all of this, after we have already discussed all of this theory. So I think we'll be getting over this quite quickly. So let's do it option by option. So first question is select the correct options. And we won't even be needing to write down the explanations for a lot of these questions, because they are just what we discussed right now. So first option says that pre-play non-binding agreement to play a particular equilibrium need not imply that the players will play that equilibrium strategy. So this is obvious, since the agreement is non-binding, it's already says that the agreement is non-binding, then it's not really necessary for the players to play that strategy. So it's correct. Similarly, let's move on to option B. So option B says action and signals are both decisions that are taken by the players. So yeah, this is what we discussed, right? Actions and decisions are both decisions that are taken by the players. So they are both decisions, these affect the payoff matrix. They don't affect the payoff matrix, but they do affect the final outcome stream. Option B is also correct. And then what's option C? Option C says that signals do not directly affect the payoffs of the payers. Yes. So yeah, so directly, what does directly mean? Directly means the entries of the payoff matrices. So yeah, signals do not directly affect the payoffs. They indirectly affect, because the final outcome of the game is affected by the signals. But in a direct sense, they really don't affect. So this statement is correct. And what does option D say? Option D says that signals sent by a player affect the information and payoff of the other player. So signals is just the information set. So information actually affects, like, so information gets affected by these signals, right? And payoff for the player, like as the information gets updated, the actions of the players can also get updated, and because of that, the payoffs will also get updated. So even though the payoffs are not affected directly, the payoff is definitely affected indirectly. Like indirectly, the payoff is affected. So this statement is also correct. So option E says action of one player can also affect information of the other player. This is also obviously true. What one player does definitely affects what other player knows or does not know. It can definitely affect. So correct. And then we have option F. It says that action of one player only affects the payoff of the other player. So this is actually incorrect because what one player does, it can affect the payoff of other player, but can also affect the payoff of that player also. Like, so if I take some action, it will affect my payoff as well as someone else's payoff. It's not that my action will just affect others' payoff. It can affect my payoff also. This is incorrect. So what are correct options? So A, B, C, D, E are correct. A, B, C, D, E, F. Correct. Right. Then maybe we can move on to the second question. Again, like almost all of the questions today are true false only. So okay. So in a sender receiver game, the sender and the receiver have access to the same information. So this is kind of false, as we already discussed the notion of sender receiver games, that sender has some information which the receiver does not have. So yeah. So here in the sender receiver game, the sender selects an action and a signal, and the receiver selects just an action. So this is also this was discussed in the lecture that sender only selects a signal. Sender does not send an action. Receiver is the one who selects an action, whereas sender selects an action as well as a signal. So this statement is also false. What's option C then? Because just now that, yeah, action taken by the like this like action taken by the receiver affects the payoff of both the players. So yeah, so this is true. Then option D, what we have is the receiver observes the action taken by the sender. So obviously, so the decision taken by the sender is the signal itself, and yeah, receiver observes this signal. This is what the game is about. So this is true. And what does option E say? Option E says the sender has no action, but it can control the information made available to the receiver. This is also true. Like sender does just send the signal, but signal affects the information. So this is also true. So hence, just writing down the answer. So hence options C, D, E. Correct. Okay. Let's do the third question then. So third question says that pick the correct options for the principal agent model. So and the principal agent model, like principal is the informed. So first option says that principal is the informed player and agent is the uninformed player. So this is actually like so out of principal and agent, like agent is actually the informed player. Like we already discussed this, we already talked about this here also, because agent knows about how much effort he or she has put in, but principal does not. So agent is the informed player or the sender, whereas principal is just the receiver or the uninformed player. So this statement is false. Similarly, let's go to option B then. So principal commits to a strategy first. So yeah, this option is correct because yeah, principal is the one who commits to a strategy, and the strategy is the wages which the principal has to give, right? So this statement is actually true. And then yeah, the third option says that the informed player commits to a strategy first. So what's the informed player? The informed player is actually, as we said, agent is the informed player and principal is the uninformed player. But we already told that so this option essentially says that agent commits to a strategy first. But we know that principal is the one committing to a strategy. Agent first sees the wage structure or the strategy of the principal and then takes an appropriate action. So this is actually false. What's option? Option D says that the principal offers a wage which is dependent on the effort observed by the principal. So the option says that the principal is offering a wage which is dependent on the effort observed by the principal. So yeah, like at least in the model of the full information, like principal agent model with full information, uh, where agent can actually, like principal can actually see the effort, the principal will actually offer a wage dependent on the effort observed. So this is kind of true. Like it can be false in a model where principal just sees the output, but like we discussed all of these models, right? This kind of a model was also discussed. So yeah, this one, the model with full information. So that's why this kind of option also makes sense, right? So options B and D are correct, right? Now let's maybe move on to the next question. So next question says that again we have to pick the correct option. So all the questions will be basically like this only. So next question says that the need to give players an incentive to report their information honestly may be called moral hazard. So this is actually uh, not correct. Like moral hazard is not this. Like moral hazard is something different, which we talked about. Moral hazard is where the agent has a choice to not even work and still get a salary. So it's not about like reporting the information honestly. There was nothing about like information misreporting, which we discussed. It was just about like not even working and still getting a salary. Similarly, the B option says that the need to give players an incentive to implement their recommended actions may be called adverse selection. So the need to give players an incentive to implement their recommended actions. So note that like this is also not adverse selection. So adverse selection was when like nature took something first. Like what adverse selection actually meant was like there were suppose some different kinds of employees with different kinds of working skill sets, and then you wanted to get the most out of everyone. And that was what adverse selection actually meant. There you do not give any incentive to players to for people to work harder. You just give out multiple contracts. So giving an incentive is something like maybe offering higher wages or something, but here you don't give higher wages, you just offer a menu of contracts or something. There is not really some incentive going on here. So this is again false. Then option C says that moral hazard arises when the action undertaken by the agent is observable. So moral hazard arises when the action taken by the undertaken by the agent is observable. So actually, this is not when moral hazard arises, right? Like because moral hazard was arising when we had to give constant wages, when the principal had to give constant wages, and that was when the actions undertaken by the agent were unobservable. So when they were unobservable, only then moral hazard arises. Here, like if you can observe what the agent is doing, then agent can't really get away by doing zero. So here this is also false. And similarly, option D says that adverse selection problems arise when the principal has more information than the agent. So note that this is not when adverse selection arises, because like you can easily think also that adverse selection, like principal never has any more information than the agent. So okay, maybe we should like label this as incorrect options. Yeah. So adverse selection, like principal never has more information than the agent. Adverse selection here, like previously arise when like agent had more information than the principal. Like agents knew about their types, like whether they're efficient or inefficient, but principal did not. This is also false. So what this means is like all options are incorrect. So options A, B, C, D. Like we have to select the incorrect options. So we could select all of these. A, B, C, D are incorrect. Right. Okay. Then maybe we can move on to the next question. So fifth question says that so there are two statements and we want to say which of these statements are true. So statement one says that in moral hazard with hidden actions, the principal can observe the effort put in by the agent. So again, like we discussed previously, like in moral hazard with hidden actions, like principal could not observe the action effort put in by the agent. Like here, moral hazard with hidden action, like when agent does the effort, principal cannot observe this. And like they don't even know about the nature. So in moral hazard with hidden actions, principal cannot observe the effort. So statement A is incorrect. And similarly, in statement two says that in moral hazard with hidden actions, the principal observes the output and can distinguish if the output was a result of nature's action or result of the effort put in by the. Okay, this should be like, yeah. Okay, this should be like agent, effort put in by the agent, not the principal. So in moral hazard, within a hidden action, principal observes the output and can distinguish if the output was the result of nature's action or the result of the effort put in by the agent. So note that in moral hazard with hidden actions, we already saw that nature acts after principle. So really, like a principle cannot determine if like the output was a result of nature's action or the effort put in by the agent. Like it cannot observe effort put in by the agent. It can also not observe the nature's action. So yeah, so it can actually not distinguish. So this statement is also false. So actually, both the statements are false. So option C is correct. So now let's move on to the sixth question. So sixth question says that Wait for this, everyone. So in the post-contractual hidden knowledge setting, the principal has access to, the agent has access to nature's choice of action. So in the post-contractual hidden knowledge setting, agent actually has access, like agent does not have access to nature's action before signing the contract, but it actually has access to this after, like before taking an action. So actually this statement is correct that agent has agent knows about natures before taking an action in this kind of a thing. So maybe I should just like extend this just to make it clearer that before the agent makes an effort, we are talking about this. Before agent decides. Yeah. So actually option A is correct. Similarly, let's move on to the option B. In the post-contractual hidden knowledge setting, knowledge accessible to the agent is hidden from the principal. Obviously, like this is true because yeah, agent knows about the nature before taking an action, but principal does not. So this is also correct. Similarly, let's go to option C. In adverse selection, without knowing the true type of the agent, the principal has to come up with a contract. So actually in adverse selection, as we already discussed, like principal does not know whether the agent, whether any agent is really efficient or inefficient or true type. So even then, principal had to come up with a contract. Like here, he or she came up with many of contracts or something. Option C is also correct. So, and adverse selection setting can be considered as a game with complete information. So this is incorrect because like the principal really, like it's a game in sense of principal, right? Principal has to decide the wages and everything. So it's a game of incomplete information with respect to principal because principal does not know about yeah, what the agent knows. Like agent knows about the nature and everything, but principal does not know. So this is actually correct. Right. So only options A, B, C are correct. Yes. Options A, B, C. Correct. So let's move on to the seventh question then. Yeah. So in seventh question, we have that we have to select the correct options. So uh, option A says that in screening games, the principal is aware of the true type of the agent. So let's just see what was screening games. So in screening games, actually nature was initialized and yeah. So screening games are something which are similar to like adverse selection games. Like nature gets initialized first, principal cannot observe, and then agent takes an action. So nature can decide the true type of the agents, which the agents will know, but the principal won't. So principal won't be aware. So this is actually incorrect. So screening games principal is really not aware of the true type of the agent. And so option B is in signaling games, the agent does not shape the information made available to the principal. So in signaling games, the agent does not shape the information made available to the principal. So this is again something which we already discussed. Like in signaling games, this is actually what happens, that agent gets to know about the nature, and then he or she sends some signals to make principal aware, so that principal can take appropriate actions. But here the option says that agent does not shape the information, which is incorrect because agent is sending a signal, so agent is actually shaping the information in signaling games. This is also incorrect. So option C is in screening games, the principal attempts to screen the agents through type. Okay, so yeah. So in screening games, the principal attempts to screen the agents through type. So this will be like what happened in this kind of a game also, adverse selection games also. Like even though the principal does not know about the agent's true types, he or she still attempts to offer a variety of contracts or something like this, so that every agent accepts his or her his or her contract based on his or her type. So basically in adverse selection games, like you can determine the type of the agents by uh, by offering up a variety of contracts and telling how what agent accepted which contract. Like the agent, like type of the agent is determined by the type of the contract that the agent admits. So in screening games, usually like principal offers determines tries to screen or tries to know agents true type using these variety of contracts or something like this. So even though the principal does not know about agents true types in screening games, the principal still the game for the principal, or principal has to set a strategy so that these true types get screened on their own. This is actually correct. Right? So only option C is correct. It's only option C is correct. Like even though principal does not know about the type in screening games, he or she still tries to screen them using some techniques or the other. Okay. Then comes the last question for the day. So almost all the questions today were theoretical, but yeah, let's just get done with this. So moral hazard arises if the information rent is positive. Is this statement true or false? So what happens in moral hazard? Like so information rent is what we were calling here, right? So in moral hazard, we are talking about this information rent, right? And this information rent was effectively what we also call the cost of micromanagement. And this occurred because the principal really had no information about the efforts made by the worker, or the or the so what I want to say is the principal only knew about the principal did not know about directly the efforts of the worker, but just only knew about the output produced by the worker. So that's why this kind of a thing happened. So there was this information rent which was paid. So actually this information rent, this moral hazard actually arose because information rent was actually positive. So this statement is actually true. So yeah. So like so if the information rent is positive, moral hazard will arise when the information rent is positive, because if information rent is positive, this means that like agent can get away with doing lesser amount of work than he or she should be doing. Like what we want to say is if agent has more information than the principal, so principal might expect the agent to work 12 hours a day to maximize the profit. But since the agent knows more than the principal, has more information than the principal, then the agent might try to exploit this information and just work 8 hours a day or something. And note that what this information rent is, what this information is actually the amount of effort the agent has put in, or the output the agent has produced, or it can be anything, randomization which occurs, or the nature or the luck. Like agent knows about this, but the principal does not know. So what this kind of means is, suppose suppose uh, agent has suppose principal and agent have agreed on a contract where agent will do 10 insurances a day. But let's say the agent gets like, and usually what the principal expects is agent will have to put in effort of like going through 50 insurances, and out of those only 10 will get going to 50 people, and out of those 50 only 10 will accept the insurance. But what happens is, suppose the agent gets lucky and agent gets like 10 out of 10, like first 10 out of 10. Then what the agent can do is, like, since he or she has reached his or her target, then the agent might just stop working and just go home, because his target of the day for the day is done. But what the principal would have, the principal, why did principal give away this contract? Like, principal had this in mind that the agent will be doing some kind of 50, going to 50 people, and out of those only 10 will be accepted. But here the agent got lucky and the first 10 were accepted. So agent actually did less work than what was expected of him. Like, even though he got the same salary as someone going to 50 people and getting 10 selected, even though the agent just wasted 10 people, like he or she like got the same salary. And that's why we are talking about this in terms of a moral hazard. Like, agent is getting same kind of salary or same wage in spite of doing lesser work than what's expected of him or her. And there's really nothing that can be done in this case. And like, this happens because information rent is positive. Like, the principal thought that this target will take this much amount of effort, but actually took lesser amount of effort or something like that. So yeah. So this information rent occurs because uh, like what principal has in mind and what agent has in mind are different. And yeah, this leads to moral hazards. So this statement is true. Okay, then. So I guess I just had only these questions for the day. Like, so we discussed so most of today's session focused on like theory, or these quick revision notes of what was discussed is this week in the lectures. So these are like quick revision notes for you guys. And then there were some like not so difficult questions based on the theory which we discussed. So all of these, like I went through these a lot faster because most of these questions were implied by what we discussed previously in the starting. Okay, then. So I guess since no one is present in the meeting in person, I guess we can close the session since there will be no doubts. So thanks for watching. So just parting words. So thanks for watching this on YouTube, guys. We'll hopefully see you in person, like in this meeting next week in like same Monday 6 to 8 p.m. session. Note that in the next week we'll be also having another session on Tuesday. Since next week will be our last session, like the 12th session on Monday, we'll also be having a summary session. So on Monday, we'll be having next week, Monday, we'll be having the 12th problem solving session. And then on Tuesday, I'll be doing a 1 hour summary session where I'll be wrapping up or like providing a quick summary of what everything was discussed in this course throughout these 12 weeks. So hopefully I'll see you guys in both the sessions, like on Monday as well as Tuesday. Monday session is from 6 to 8 p.m. and Tuesday is from 6 to 7 p.m. Okay. So till then, okay, maybe I'll just stop sharing. So see you guys next time. Bye bye.